Hello, welcome to A VO's Journey. My name is Anthony. Today we're talking about some tips on how to start learning voice acting. I did a video earlier today on, question that I get and I see, and I think a lot of people question themselves, is voice acting real acting? And then what is real acting? And if that's the case, how can we train, to become better voice actors? Because let's face it, there is an enormous amount of history, education around acting, okay, performance. But when it comes to voice acting, because it's new, all right, in the sense that, it's something that, doesn't have thousands of years of history, right? And because there's not the physicality of being seen, the training on voice acting, kind of the literature, the history, it is at best modified. Do you know what I mean? Because it's a different medium, but yet we are still acting just like anybody else. So we're going to kind of dive into that today. Don't worry, don't let your head explode on that. But I want to, kind of address some things that I think are a great place to start and how we can, begin your journey, or at least, work on getting better at voice acting. So something that, I've thought a lot about this, and, I went to school, and got my degree in theater and my MF or my BFA. And then, I went and got my master's degree, and, I performed professionally on stage, and I directed and produced, and I taught, and I did all, I was a live stage actor and director and producer for many, many years, and teacher and coach. And then, I got into voice acting, and, having taught theater, performance, history, technical theater, all of this, and then coming to voice acting, I've racked my brain for many years, you know what I mean, to figure out how do you bridge the gap, from the immense amount of material and training that exists for, live stage acting, to voice acting. How do we bring that? Because so much of stage acting, because it's so physical, is based out of physicality, right? I mean, the very idea of, Konstantin Stanislavski, who's very prolific, kind of the father of modern performance, if you will, right? Is about, discovering truth through, physicality in a lot of senses, right? Exploring ourselves, and the first part of that exploration really is, the physical nature of our being. Anyways, with all that being said, that's why there's a lot of challenges, if you will, on bringing over a lot of the acting training that exists into voiceover. And I think that because of this, we get a lot of situational training. And what I mean by that is training that is based on the, script at hand, right? Whatever the script is, you'll see a lot of training that goes around that. And that's fine. That's good. You know what I mean? You have a script, you're presented, there's an analysis there's an interpretation, you know what I mean? And then we're trying to find, that golden reed, if you will. And that's wonderful. But a lot of times there's not much at all of training outside of analysis of a particular script in a situation. And that's because, right, it is difficult to, quantify what we do without the physical aspect of it. Because we're, as humans, everything we do involves some sort of physical movement. And that's kind of the first lesson that I want to talk, or first kind of idea to talk to you today. And we're just going to cover kind of broad ideas as we go into this, because, we do this a lot, and, we really go into depth about all this and train and stuff in a VO's Journey Lead Academy. But the overall idea here, the first part is be physical when you're acting in voiceover. No one's going to see you, of course, but the physical nature is brought out. You can hear it. Just like me, I'm talking with my hands. That brings out a sort of authoritative confidence flow in my speaking, right? And understanding. It shapes my words and how I say them through a physical movement. Okay? And you can hear that. I mean, if you weren't listening to, if you weren't watching me on this YouTube video, you would hear that sort of flow in my voice, and that comes from the physical nature. Can you do it by standing like this and just talking into the mic? You can even tell by I didn't even try. I didn't even do that mentally. I just I just went like this, and all of a sudden my voice started sounding very, just leveled. There was no expression in it, right? So that, that's something to note, right? Don't be afraid to bring the physical nature to it. Now, the second thing is we can't overlook the fact that voice acting is different because of that physical nature, because we don't move around, because there's not a stage that we need to address. Okay, we don't have those concerns in a small booth. So how do we then bring all of that physical nature to what we're doing? How do we practice? Even with acting is always challenging to practice on your own, right? Which is why some of the things that Stanislavski did were so revolutionary too, because a lot of that, with his book, there was a lot of him, especially beginning, starting to work on his own, right? And then you have people like Uta Hagen, who tried to create something to where you didn't have to work with other people. You could work on acting by yourself, and that's always been a challenge. Besides working on memorization and maybe, your blocking, meaning where you move, there's not a lot that you could do without partners or something, right? Because that's what acting is, generally, you are acting as reacting. So you have to have something to react from. Monologues have become more prevalent, but the reality is that was acting. So, but for us, again, that's something that is a challenge because we're alone, we're by ourselves. So how do we practice, acting and getting better at our craft and not being so tied to one script, right? So here's where, it dawned upon me, and it kind of lives right, if you think about it, it lives right in front of us as voice actors all the time, and that is tones. Okay, if you haven't, what tones are. If you haven't heard of tones, basically the idea here is these are a tone in which you say your script. Okay, and these are overarching things, but they're like conversational. You've heard that a lot. Authoritative. Okay, enticing. These are, matter of fact. Sultry. We could even go deeper into how intimate, how each one of these, like we can go further down, but these tones are styles, even, if you will. Well, style is going to be more about how you deliver that tone. But those tones, for example, authoritative. Right now, I would say that my tone is authoritative / conversational with you. Okay, because I'm coming from a place of authority. So a lot of how I'm speaking to you is in declarative sentences. I end down a lot. All right, there's not a lot of fluctuation in my voice. There's fluctuation in pitch and stuff, but I'm basically staying in the lower range of my voice. There's a certainty with that, right? And the conversational style nature is that it's very loose, free flowing. It doesn't feel like it's scripted. Now, of course, that's a little easier in this situation because it's not scripted. Right? That's another challenge that we run into as voice actors is, how do we make a script sound like it's our words when it's not our words? And sometimes a lot of them are not written very well, meaning they're not written to be actually spoken in a manner in which we would typically speak. They're written they're written to be read, like on a page, so they're grammatically correct. The sentence structure is correct, but that's not how we talk. We don't talk generally that way. So we have to work on that. But where I'm going with this whole thing is archetypes. So it dawned on me that, practicing voiceover or acting in general for voiceover, we need to practice what kind of tones, these archetypes, if you will, these pre-done characters that we bring to the table when we perform that are unique to us. And what I mean by that is that if I get a script and the script calls for something authoritative, whether it's an e-learning script, whether it's a commercial script, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a radio spot, no matter what it is, an audio book, no matter what it is, if the tone is supposed to be authoritative, okay, that I need to create an archetype around that. What is my authoritative voice? Okay, how do I deliver that voice? And then from that authoritative voice, there's a style in which is uniquely my style. So you've got a couple things going on here, okay? But, you can define style in my personal opinion. This is not a definition. This is just how I look at it, all right? That's what makes you you. Okay, that's what makes you different than everybody else, your style. You could say a style is a combination of the way your voice sounds, the way you shape and say your words specifically, that is something that you and your speech patterns. So you could say style also could be based off of your accent, your belief, what you believe in the world to be. Are you an intense person? Are you a relaxed person? Is the glass half empty? Is the glass half full? All of this stuff, your personality, it all kind of meshes together into a style that is you. It's your personality. So I get probably a better word would that be your personality / style, right? So your personality with a tone. All right, and you put those two together like authoritative. Where does that's your archetype? All right, so and when you think about that definition of archetype, and a lot of these time, and this is another thing too on a side note, is a lot of these words were not meant to. I'm not pulling a Shakespeare here and making up a bunch of stuff, but a lot of these words too, as for voice actors, we have to, or I like to take them and mold them a little bit to mean, something that makes sense for us as voice actors. But a lot of them don't, because an archetype, right? We think of a, character that is, something this over arching idea of a character. Do you know what I mean? Like the mother. The father, these are archetypes, you know what I mean? The soldier. And that's a great place for us to start, right? Because we have these archetypes and then we add our style to them. And basically what that allows us to do is to create different read styles so that when we go into a job, an audition, we can pull them out and do them right away. Because as we talked about all this, and I'm going to end it with this for today's video, is that I think one of the biggest differences for us, and then which I love about voice acting, but also super challenging, is we don't memorize lines. Every other form of theater live stage acting as well as cinema, you memorize the lines. Now, you could argue that, they on TV, they don't memorize the lines for that long. But the reality, everybody memorizes their lines except us. I mean, unless you're a news anchor or something like that, right? Unless there's cue cards and live shows and so forth. But for the most part, in the acting medium, for the amount of acting we do, we don't memorize lines. So that means we are expected to do things quickly. And because we're expected to do things quickly, we need to be able to bring that archetype / style to a read right away. It has to be ready to go right away. And we need to be able to shift in between them. This is unique to voice acting, right? Because, as on the stage, you had time to memorize your lines, to explore, to find that truth, if you will. Okay. And in cinema, the same thing too. A lot of people will have a script for many months. Now, that's not always the case, and it's not always the case in acting. Of course, it's not. There's always the situations where you're thrown right into something with a day or less notice. I understand that, but generally speaking, that's not the way that works. But for us, it's always the way it works. All right, as voice actors, so we have to approach all of the acting stuff that you learn. In all other acting mediums, it all still applies. It's just modified in a way that we are now taking all that information and that learning and that training and applying it in immediate situations. There's not a 2-week, 2-month, 6-month process to finding your voice, for that role. So that's just something to consider. And that's what I love about voice acting, too, because it's challenging, right? So anyways, I hope this has just at least sparked some ideas, some thoughts, learning about, how does acting across different mediums, how does the training, does it change? Or do we just modify because the performance length or time changes? That's really the biggest change besides the physicality. Right, is that in voice acting, we get a script and it's supposed to be done within that day, under an hour usually. You know what I mean? Of when we get, unless it's an audiobook, of course. But even with audiobooks, think of audiobooks. We don't have time to read an entire book, then perform it. I mean, in an ideal world, we absolutely would. It makes perfect sense. And you really, you should, of course. But the reality is with the amount of money that we get paid for it, and the amount of time it takes to be able to do it, you don't have a lot of that time, and most people don't do it. Bigger people, bigger stars or bigger people who do a lot more works. They have teams of people. They still don't. They're not able to read the books. Now there's fortunately summaries and things that you can find. And talking to the author and doing work to know what's happening in the book and your characters and stuff. But the whole point I'm trying to make to you is that this is a style of performance that's quick. You know what I mean? So we modify a lot of what we do to learn how to bring that deepness, that depth into a quick performance. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. As always, check out Avio's Journey Elite Academy. We'd love to have you. It's only $39 to join for the first month. So talk to you guys later. Have a great Monday. Bye-bye.